Hello, and a warm welcome to a special edition of Love Athletics, dedicated to the effect of Supershoes on athletics performances. We're delighted to have two very special guests to discuss this subject. Coach Robert Johnson of US website letsrun.com and French coach and statistician Pierre Vazel. Now, before we turn to the theme of today's show, I'd like to hear from our guests how they started their career in coaching. So, Robert, how did you get into coaching?
I think I was a frustrated, often injured athlete. So my identical twin brother is a much more famous runner than me. He was fourth in the country twice. So I kind of thought I had the talent to run like that. But when I was hurt, I started I remember thinking, if I ever get healthy and can run, I'll be such a better runner because I will know not to make the mistakes that I used to make. So I think being injured made me think about the training more and stuff like that. And then sure enough, in like 2000, I was actually injured as my brother was training for the Olympic trials. And this guy that was training with us in Flagstaff, Arizona said, well, why don't you apply for the job at Cornell University? And I said, well, they won't hire me. I'm too young, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, put your name in the hat. And since I couldn't run, I might as well try. And next thing I know, I was coaching for 10 years at a pretty prestigious university in the United States, Cornell University. So I guess being injured got me into coaching.
That's great. And Pierre-Jean, you took an original path to coaching. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I started as an art student in Fine Art School in Rennes in France. And I also started coaching while I was at school. And actually, coaching became my art project for the last 2 years of my diploma. So it's quite unusual, but I still do the same method in training, which is mainly based on observations, on drawing, and on numbers. It was the core of my artwork back then, and it's still the core of my coaching work as today.
And tell us how you started coaching Olusobi Fasuja.
So it was in 2004. I was doing some bios for IAAF at that time. And I went to see that guy who was new on the circuit. And the first thing he told me, well, I don't have coach. I'm looking for one. So I told him, well, I know some coaches. I take your number and I will ask around. But nobody really wanted to start with a 19-year-old Nigerian. And some people actually encouraged me to give him training plans just for beginning like this. And I thought it was temporary. But actually, it went well together because he never had any coach and I never had any athlete. So we learned together. And in 2005, he was the youngest semifinalist at 100 meters. And the next year, he broke the African record, which stood until this year. And in 2008, he won World Indoors. So it was a great journey. And it propelled me into the coaching world. And we still remain great friends as today.
I just love that story. And exactly, within a year, African record. Congratulations. Yes. So let's go back to today's theme of Supershoes. Now, just to remind everyone, Supershoes were first launched for elite athletes in 2016 and became available to the public for the full year in 2018. After initially focusing on road races, manufacturers developed models for middle distances and finally sprints. Now, Pierre-Jean, can you explain to our viewers what are the key technological innovations of Supershoes?
So if we are talking about these new generation shoes, we have to keep in mind that all the components were already there in former models. The difference is that it was put together in one shoe. What I mean by different components was the shape of the shoe, which brings you on your front of feet. The carbon, of course, but it's there for a long time. What is new actually, but is the thickness and the inclusion of small bags, but some other models in early 90s were already using those kind of bags. Like I don't know if I can mention brands, but Marie-Josée Pérec, for example, was using some airbags shoes, spike shoes in 92 Olympics. But the new thing is that all those elements are brought together in one shoe. The models that was tested in 2020 were not really efficient. They were tried in US by some sprint groups, and the model was improved this year, and obviously was working for most of the athletes and for most of the races, but we can develop later on those specific aspects.
Great. So now one of the things we're going to look at is how this technology affects performance. And the first thing to note is that Supershoes help athletes run faster. Now let's look at the data. So we had an interesting stat on letsrun.com in Jonathan Gall's article of 25th October, highlighting the number of times athletes ran below 2 hours 05 in the marathon over the last 11 years. So this year, 24, a lot more than any other year. 2019 and 2018 had 17 performers, and the number for 2021 could have been higher had wind not hampered runners in the Valencia Marathon last weekend. If the wind hadn't been there, that 24 would probably have been higher. And if we look at marathon performances by limit, there has been a clear evolution over the last few years, even considering that 2020 and to a lesser extent 2021 were affected by reduced competition opportunities due to the COVID pandemic. Now, the stats here are for men's races, but women also had a great year. And the most impressive record of all was the one set by Letzenbet Gidey in the Valencia Half Marathon on 26 October. Really fabulous performance, great. So the data fully supports the assertion that Supershoes do indeed help athletes run faster. Robert, what do you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly for the distance running, there's not any doubt about it. I mean, I think it's interesting how it's come about in the change in perception. When the Supershoes were first invented, well, first of all, they were sort of secretly unveiled in the 2016s, really with the marathon, Olympic marathon. Nobody knew that they had them. But when Eliud Kipchoge did the sub-2 attempt, people thought it was the clock and the car pacing that was blocking the wind. No one thought that the shoes were doing anything. But Nike said, hey, we have a scientific study showing you that they're 4% better in terms of running economy. And it took a couple of years for everybody to believe it. But now the data is pretty hard to ignore. And I've been harping on it nonstop for 2 or 3 years about just how it makes time comparisons really sort of hard to do. I mean, I think it's worth at least a minute and a half for an elite men's marathon, or probably 2 minutes. But if you're still a skeptic, if you're still a doubter, all I would say is go out and buy a pair of shoes. I'm getting up there in age. I'm getting close to 50. I can't believe it. I have to confess this, but I've been talking about these shoes for almost 5 years now. I finally wore them for the first time 2 weeks ago, and it is unlike anything I've ever run in. Like, I don't know how you could put them on and think that this is not going to significantly help your performance. I mean, you literally feel like a kid in a bounce house. They're that spongy. And my wife is not a runner, but she heard me just raving about them walking across, our house. And she wants me to buy her a pair for Christmas because she thinks it's just going to put a spring in her step. So I think the stats back it up. And then there's always that personal observation where it's pretty impressive. So, we can talk about why, but the foam is so much springier than anything I've felt. And it's so light. There's also a theory that some people think that it's sort of extending you're giving you an artificially long, stride because you're actually taller than you would normally be in a normal pair of racing flats.
Yeah, that's interesting. I watched your Twitter post in which you're saying that it feels like you're going to the moon. So now that your wife wants a pair, I think that's really cool. You have your Christmas presents all sorted out. Have you tried the shoes, Pierre-Jean?
Yes, I was sent a model by one of my athlete sponsor. My athlete is a thrower, and the foam was too spongy, so he couldn't run with it. So he gave me. And during the lockdown, I was able to. We were allowed 1 hour time slot to do exercise, and I used them to do running. And I was actually surprised to be able to run for 1 hour with those shoes. And I would never be able to run 1 hour with other shoes because of my back and my knees and stuff. And so yes, it's quite impressive for a casual runner like me. So yeah.
Okay, well then I should try them because I haven't been able to run for a few years now because of my back. But maybe with Supershoes I can get back to doing some running because I miss it. Now, another point about Supershoes is that they help athletes recover more quickly. I mean, this year, Paris Jepchirchir won New York 13 weeks after winning the Olympic Games. Belgium's Bashir Abdi won Rotterdam Marathon in a European record 11 weeks after the Olympics. Kenenisa Bekele, third in Berlin, sixth in New York, 6 weeks later. And runners have reported reduced pounding, so reduced muscle soreness and faster recovery. Now, Robert, how will this change road racing?
Well, I think that's a good thing because I think historically, the marathoners pretty much normally did 2, maybe 3 marathons a year. I think the norm is going to be more now. I think it could be at least 3 or 4. Not that I ever ran that fast in the marathon, but, I remember 2:23 was my best, but at the end, I used to just get the lightest shoe possible. I was thinking more weight is slowing you down. But I remember thinking, if I ever run another marathon, I want something heavier. I want something more substantial because the pounding, my quads and would just get destroyed. And I would get tired and just slam my foot down at the end of the race because I was too tired to sort of, protect myself when I was hitting the ground. And I remember thinking, I need more cushioning. And I think that with the new Supershoes, you get the best of both worlds because I wish I had them. I could go get them. I think they're not in my car. But, you're getting the cushioning that I wanted because the heel is huge, but they're so light. Like literally when I got them in the mail, I was like, I can't believe that this box is this light. So they're super light, but you're getting, probably more cushioning than you would just in your normal everyday trainers of yesteryear. So, and if you're not getting as much pounding, we just heard how he could run for an hour and he normally couldn't do that. So yeah, it's already helping.
Now, Pierre-Jean, if Supershoes help athletes recover more quickly, how is this going to affect training?
So this is the unknown part yet, because we have seen that there is a direct effect just wearing shoes and running faster on competition. Now, how much it will affect training? I've heard some middle distance runners and steeplechase athletes who told me that they were able to do more, actually to recover quicker from specific training with spikes and steeplechase training. So maybe they will be able to do more of it. There is a tendency in the past couple of decades, let's say, towards polarization of training, which is a more focus on very slow training and very fast training. Maybe there will be new evolution with these shoes, maybe in increasing the intensity. We don't know why polarization of training is actually working, but maybe there will be more advance and more understanding of it, and maybe more percentage of the training will be done in the highest intensity, or maybe the aerobic part will be more intensively because they are able now to recover. it's difficult to know what will be the next evolution in training, but probably there will be better performance out of these new training methods. So we can expect even greater times in the next decades just because of improvement in training now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because one of the things that when I was, in high school, I used to ask my coach, I said, well, a cyclist will train for 4 or 5 hours a day. Why don't we run for 4 or 5 hours a day? And the response I got was, you can't. Your legs can't tolerate it. But, now with the super shoes, I don't know, maybe the distance runners will have to run even more because, I think it's a fine line. Generally, the more you train, the better off you are. But a big part of getting better is recovery. So if you can train more and still recover without getting injured, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. And as we said, this year Supershoes also arrived in the sprints, and Tokyo Olympics suggests that Supershoes helped athletes maintain maximum velocity for a longer while. Now, Robert compiled some stats by limits, which show that the women's 100 really moved into a new dimension this year. And I mean, this is something that we knew because the Jamaican ladies, in particular, they were really quite amazing. So it's interesting to see what has been going on.
Yeah, to me, the super shoes and the sprints, it kind of reminds me of the distance running. Like the first couple of years, we're like, well, no, it's not the shoes, it's something else. It's the car for Kipchoge or something like that. And then, this year I was like, how could it work for a sprint? But if you actually look at the shoe, just Google like Nike Air Zoom Max Fly. I mean, they have it was kind of like an AirPod. It reminds me of the foam that I have on my racing shoe. On my distance shoe. So you've got the perfect cushioning, a sprinter's more up on their toes. So they're getting that spring back. The foam is very sort of responsive. I assume that the AirPod is very responsive too. So it's probably, the same concept. But, I was talking to Jeff Burns of the University of Michigan this morning about this because he's a PhD and an expert on the shoes. And he sent me, after we hung up, he sent me a text to a BBC article, whereas in January, I think it was January of this year, but he basically predicted, he's like thinking about it a little bit. He's like, look, if we have a 1% improvement, he was like looking at the shoe properties. He's like, I would think that might result in a 1% improvement. And then he's like, a 1% improvement for an elite male sprinter would be about 0.09 in terms of the 100, and for a woman it would be, a little bit more, and that was probably the most surprising thing to me. Like it's kind of hard to, again, some people probably think, no, it can't be the shoes, but look at the Jamaican, Lane Thompson-Hera and Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price. I mean, they're 29 and 33 or 30, I forgot, but they're not young, and neither one of them had broken 10.7, and now they're running 10.54 and 10.60, I think it was. I mean, they both came down by at least 0.10 of a second this year. So, could there be other explanations? Yes. Hey, there was this whole thing. The track designer in Tokyo was claiming that he invented a better track, but all of those fast times weren't run on the Tokyo track. And the other thing that's interesting is, you can't just say it's all the shoes. I mean, there could be a placebo effect. And another interesting thing to me is, these two great Jamaicans, up until this year, they had only raced each other 5 times in their life at 100 meters, which is amazing. I mean, they were, in the same training group in Jamaica all the time, never raced each other. This year, they raced each other 5 times at 100. So they equaled their lifetime performances. So, yes, being against the other best women in the world more often, certainly that could be a part of it. But at their age, to improve that much, to me, it's crazy. Actually, I just looked it up. Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price is now 34. So 29 and 34 to whack off, to go from 10.70 to 10.60 is quite a lot at age 34.
Now, in at the pre-event press conference in Lausanne, both Elaine and Shellyanne were saying that, Supershoes, but that's not really the whole explanation. Maybe sometimes athletes play down the shoes because they don't want their own talent to be played down. But I think there's also a mental part and the newfound belief that Florence Griffiths Joyner's records are not totally out of reach. Now, what do you think, Pierre-Jean?
Well, I've been watching closely and analyzing and taking videos and splits and looking to the analyses made, and it's quite, I don't have definitive answer, but I would first challenge the idea that there is a new trend this year in longest acceleration path and maintaining the top speed for longer. I know that there was some graph displayed after the races during US trials and at the Olympics, but I'm not sure about the accuracy of this data, because when I confronted those speed curves with the splits taken with high-speed camera, we don't find the same thing. And the split indicates that the top speed location and duration is about the same as before. But again, we are talking about sprints, and the difference in times are very short and not as obvious as in marathon, where we are talking about minutes. That's the first thing. And actually, the data, unpublished data from Omega, showed that the top speed location and top speed duration is not different from before. And the technology used for the graphs immediately after the race also showed they were used in 17 and 19 World Champs, but not published. And again, it was found that the top speed was sometimes up to 95 meters, which indicates that it's not really reliable. Now, we were talking just before about Elliot Thompson and Ira and Shellyanne Fraser-Pryce, and I looked at how they improved either step length or step frequency. And it turns out that even if they use the same shoes model, Elaine improved in reducing her step length, but improving her step frequency. And Shellyanne is almost the opposite. She improved a little bit her step length and improved and reduced a little bit her step frequency. So that's why it's complicated, because we would expect that this shoe helps everybody the same. But for those two very fast athletes, actually the two fastest ever with Florence Griffiths, those new shoes provided some different advantage, actually opposite advantage, either step length for Shellyanne or frequency for Elaine. And it's important also to note that those shoes are not very well helpful for in the bend. If you take Stu Bingtian, the Chinese sprinter, who did an impressive Asian record in semifinal in 1883, he was one of the first athletes in the world to use those shoes, but he's only using them at 100 meters. In the relay, where he runs the bend, he used the former model, because on the bend, the cushion and the foam is not providing enough stability. So the Jamaicans, like Elaine Thompson, I could film her very closely on the bend in Tokyo on the 200 meters, and I could see that there is a kind of a lack of stability. Really, it helps mainly on straightway, but on the bend, Andre Thompson, I was told that he was not using. He was proposed thick shoes with a large foam, but he didn't like it, so he used reduced foam to run the 200 meters, and that's how he won the Olympic title. So maybe there will be more improvement, further improvement in those shoes to have more maintaining on the foot and on the step contact in the bend. And maybe if they found it, there will be even more improvement in 200, 400, and 400 hurdles.
Right. Well, that's interesting because in an interview published in September in French sports paper L'Equipe, part of a series of articles on Supershoes, Laurent Mevy, coach of Dutch hurdler Femke Bol, who had some pretty amazing results this year, pointed out other advantages of Supershoes: improved running posture and improved stride efficiency over a longer time. So, as you said, the effects vary for different athletes, but Femke seemed to benefit from the shoes.
Yes, and the shape of the shoe is not that crazy. Like the Nike shoes look very different from what we've seen for decades. Um, they use New shoes that are not really impressive. But the most impressive world record was set by Warren in men's 400-meter hurdles, and it was done with um, an old model. Of course, the plate was very hard, but there was no cushion or bubble foam or anything. So, but yes, we can see that some athletes are improving their posture, but it's difficult to know how much it comes from technical work or the shoes or getting familiar with those shoes, because I think it takes some time. And that's just my opinion, but Shelly Ann was the favorite to win the 100 meters in Tokyo, but she didn't use those shoes in heats. She used it in final, and I could see that she stumbled a little out of the blocks, and I wonder how much is that the shoe effects, because she's the best starter ever, and even with those new shoes, she couldn't reproduce the early splits she was doing in Doha 19, for example, or Berlin 09, where she had crazy starts. Maybe those shoes don't really help her at the start, and maybe she should have used them in hits to get even more used to this technical effect. I don't know. That's just my coach external point of view. So
I
it
think
creates problems also.
I think you're making a good point there, because Jeff Burns of the University of Michigan told me that the sprint shoes, the new ones, feel kind of awkward, and he thought that sprinting is a much more technical event. So you put on the new distance shoes for the first time, and you could go run a marathon in them. It didn't feel that weird to me. I mean, I put them on immediately and ran the fastest 3-mile time I have in, over a year or so. But he said with the sprint shoes, they feel a little bit awkward, and he thought it would take time to get used to them. And to me, the data is not quite there for the sprints. I mean, the Jamaican women are the most obvious. Like, why else would they be improving this much at this age? But some of the other times, I mean, we had fewer sub 2,200 meter times for the men this year than we did in 2016. So I don't know. I mean, I think that it's definitely working for the sprints, but again, not every shoe company even has these new sprint spikes out yet. So I think that we will see the times coming down, but I mean, if you were a scientist and you wanted to prove it with the data, I don't think that they probably wouldn't have a statistically, because there's more in general, there's more faster times now than 2012, but that was also true in 2016 than 2012. So, you would expect people to be getting a little bit faster just as the years go on in general, although you think it would be plateauing, and it doesn't seem to be plateauing quite as much as you would think.
I'm really convinced that these shoes can help, and that in general, having spikes as opposed to flat shoes or barefoot is helpful. However, and I love sport history, so I had to mention that there is a sprinter who used to run barefoot, and her name is Yvette de Klerk. She was South African, and she was one of the fastest in the world, although it was during the apartheid and she was not able to compete internationally. But she was running barefoot, and her PBs are 11:06 and 22:06, and it's really, really fast, especially in 18:09 where she ran those times. And sometimes she would put spikes when the track was too hot, but she didn't run that fast. She ran 11:09 with spikes, and as opposed to 11:06 bare feet. So it's really intriguing, because you could imagine that having spikes really helped to start and to have, I mean, to run faster, to grip the surface, the track. But she was running faster this way. At the same decade, also Zola Budd in distance running set world record and still has a world junior record set bare feet. But in sprinting, and it's not well-known story, but I had she confirmed to me by message yesterday. So I wanted to share this story because it's quite intriguing, and it gives perspective on how much the shoe overall gives advantage to the athletes.
Well, that's really interesting, because we've all heard about Zola Budd, but I didn't know about de Klerk, for example. So that's a really interesting story. Now, one thing, we've briefly touched on it, but indirectly, as super shoes help athletes run faster and recover more quickly, this must have an effect on the athlete's confidence. Robert, what do you think?
Definitely. I mean, I think that, I wouldn't call myself an athlete, but when I put the shoes on 2 weeks ago, I expected to run faster. I was going to give a harder effort, but I think that the placebo effect is real in some ways, but I also think that, I don't know, like to deny the impact of technology. I think we've seen this before. Like, people think, sometimes you'll see it in sporting events, people say, oh, the crowd made them run so much faster. The energy of the crowd. Well, like in America, we just had a high school cross country race last weekend. There was a huge crowd. People, and the times were really ridiculous. And people are like, oh, it's because the crowd was 3 or 4 deep. The kids have never run in a environment like this. And I said, well, if that's the truth, if the crowd made a big difference, then why were the times so fast in Tokyo? There was no crowd. Yet Karsten Wohlholm was setting a world record. Sidney McLaughlin was setting a world record. So, I think that the mental side certainly helps, but I don't know. If I was a betting man, I would say it's probably more the technology than the mindset, because, I think that, Elaine Thompson-Herah and Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, they've probably been dreaming of breaking the world record for a long time. Why was it this year that all of a sudden they think it's a possibility? Well, I think it's because they started running faster because they've got better shoes on their feet. But you could, you could say, no, it's because they started racing each other and they had to raise the game of the level. So, or the track's better. I get it. We don't have definitive proof, but, I think like 5 years ago, we had the distance shoes designers telling us, hey, we've got the laboratory data to prove it. Now, they haven't really said that as much in the sprints, like, hey, we're going to prove it. But I think that'll probably come out in a year or two.
And what do you think, Pierre-Jean?
Yes, definitely. I think it's more a disadvantage if you don't have them. You feel maybe that you are running longer distance, or your starting line is placed behind. But I would like to mention that Kevin Mayer was offered to run with these shoes. Kevin Mayer is a world record holder at Decathlon, and he took silver medal in Tokyo. But he didn't want to use them because he wanted to compare with his past performance. And for him, it was more important to check where he is from his own performance rather than trying to beat other performances from other athletes. So it was quite interesting to have his state of mind and point of view on this. And a second point is many French athletes received those new shoes, and sometimes 2 models in Tokyo training camp, pre-Olympic training camp. and they were clueless about which model to use, or keep with the shoes they train all year long. And the choice was difficult for them, and maybe even after the Olympics, they would feel that they made the wrong choice because their performance was not good enough. So sometimes it's disturbing because they don't have definitive answer in sprint and hurdles and long sprints. For distance running now, I think it's there is a consensus that yes, it helps, but for sprinting, it's still so and so, especially on the bend.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Now, some journalists have compared Supershoes to technological doping because it reduces the importance of talent. What do you think, Pierre?
I think this question comes back in from time to time. We can think about pole vault fiberglass in the early 60s, when you can see in the press back then that the former champions were really against those new poles because now they were downgraded on the world all-time lists, like Vardaman, who held the world record for so long, and his performance were within a few months, his performance were like casual. So, but pole vault was associated as a technical event. So having technical improvements was not that a big deal. Now, if you think about running in the popular imaginary and collective memory is more related to hard work and the performance, pure performance. And the main illustration, of course, is Bikila winning the marathon bare feet. And that's the kind of purity of connection with the nature and pure talent and effort that is antagonist with the evolution of technology. I feel that's because of it that the new technologies are not well received in the running world, because since the 18th century, running is associated with the hard work, with temper, with courage, and a lot of values of human being and performance. But if a new technology helps this or minor those strong values and heart of a sport feat, I think it's a problem. And that's why there are so many critics regarding the introduction of those super shoes in running world, as opposed to pole vault or bobsleigh or tennis or different kind of sports.
Oh, that's really
or
interesting.
Cycling. The bicycles have completely different shape from 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Shoes, we are not ready to have new models.
I don't think you said downplays the importance of talent. I mean, Eliud Kipchoge was the best marathoner in the world before the super shoes. He's still the best marathoner in the world after the super shoes. Elaine Thompson-Hare and Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price were the best female sprinters in the world before the super shoes. They're still the best super shoes sprinters in the world after the super shoes. Now they're just faster. So I think it makes the historical time comparisons difficult, which is, one of the beauties of athletics. It's a place where the records mean something. So they mean less. We're just going to have to adjust to it. But again, I don't want to be a Luddite. I mean, we used to have dirt tracks. Now we have Mondo tracks, and the tracks get better. So I think we've always had technology getting better. And David Epstein has a neat YouTube interview on how Jesse Owens really isn't that much slower than Usain Bolt. Just the technology has gotten better. The tracks have gotten better. So, but, is it too much too soon? I guess for some purists it is. But, I think the one thing that's interesting and a little bit troublesome to me is not everyone responds to the shoes the same way. Particularly, we know that for a fact for the distance shoes. So some people are super responders. Some people barely respond. I had a top coach tell me he thought that the less elite you were, the more it would help you become elite. You would get like a good stride, you get good mechanics, and you would look like a beautiful runner and get up on your toes more. Whereas if you already had that, if you're already perfection, how much better can you get than perfection? You can't. But hey, Kipchoge was pretty close to perfection before them, and he's just, he's faster now. So I don't know. It used to really bother me, I think, but now I've kind of accepted it as I don't think we're going back. I mean, people said one thing that I guess that really does bother me is some of the rules don't make sense to me. Why can we wear these shoes in a marathon, but not on the track? If you want a distance runner to let them wear them wherever they want to wear them. It doesn't make sense to me. So I would like to be consistent there from a intellectual standpoint, I guess. But if you want to have limits, I get it. We don't want to make it, if you look at Formula One or NASCAR, they have rules. So technology is still important and very important, but you don't want that to be the deciding factor. And I think that the problem, it may have been more unfair in the sprinting this year because the shoes are new than it was I think the distance running is getting a little bit more even in the sense of most brands have a shoe, but people act like, oh, every brand has their own super shoe. We're good to go. It's not a problem. And that's not true because some of the studies are coming out now and saying only 2 or 3 of the super shoes are really super good. They're giving like a 3% improvement in running economy. A bunch of shoes are doing like 1.5%. And then a bunch of shoes really aren't doing anything, even though they cost $200, And then how far down do you want it to go? Do you want a high school athlete to have to go out and buy a $250 pair of shoes to have, the best shoe for the race?
Yeah, no. And I mean, the point about tracks is, obviously one that makes a lot of sense to me is like if you want to be a total purist and only have people, keeping the pure aspect of the athlete's effort, then you can't have super fast tracks either. You should all be running on cinder tracks. Now, critics have also said too many records devalue these performances, and we have had quite a lot of records over 5, 10,000, 5K, 10K, half marathons. Now, what do you think about this criticism? Robert?
Well, yeah, we've had, just particularly that. I guess the 5, now it's coming to the track. Yeah, the world records, I don't want to say they don't mean anything anymore, but I've gotten to the point now when I see a marathon time, I add 2 minutes to it. Just, I think, okay, 2:01:39. That's an impressive world record, but I think of it as more like 2:03. Do I think Eliud Kipchoge is a much better runner than Haile Gebrselassie? No, I do not. I think that there's like perfection that's possible, in terms of the human body, and like you can't get much better than that. So whether it's a Kipchoge, a Gebrselassie, a Bekele, a Daniel Komen, I think if all of these people were in their peak form in the same technology at the same time, I think they would be running very similar times. I guess on the sprint side, I was going to say Usain Bolt. No one's really come close to that, but that's not really true. Johan Blake was pretty close before he got hurt. So, but yeah, I don't know. Some people now are just like, oh, another world record. It doesn't bother me. I don't get depressed about it now. I'm celebrating a let's not, good day. Like 62:52 and a half marathon. Yeah. Without the shoes, she wouldn't be running that fast, but hey, let's enjoy it. We're going to see the first sub 14 women's 5,000 soon, the first sub 29 minute 10,000 soon. I'm not sure if we're going to see a sub 2:10 marathon, but maybe before I die, we will.
Well, you just said that you had 2 minutes on a men's marathon. Now, Letsen Beskide was 70 seconds faster than any other woman on the half marathon. So she would probably have beaten that record even by your standards.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, she's amazing.
Yeah. Pierre-Jean, what do you think about the issue?
Yes, there is. It's difficult to keep track of all the road world record, but it's also because there are more world record, more distance recognized. Also, they have added 5K, and so it's the market also of and the circuit of road running is developing more and more and more, to the detriment of some track races, actually middle and long distance on the track. So we've been so spoiled with the number of world records, but there is a special year in 1965 where 48 world records were ratified by IAAF and 26 alone in men's distance running. And it's difficult to understand why that year, because it was not an effect of new shoes or new tracks. And it was only 1 year like this, with an incredible generation also of runners, with Ron Clark, Michel Jazzy, and so on. But then the next year, the wave was gone. So maybe, I don't know, maybe the wave will be gone next year. Maybe now runners will run for the win more than the records. I don't know. It comes by wave, and it's difficult. But I think what concerns me more is that the new shoes are expensive and not widely available in all the regions of the world, and it only increases the technological gap there is between athletes, depending on the region they are training. And some don't even have proper tracks or proper coaching or proper nutrition to begin with. And we are talking about Supershoes, but it reserved for special elite athletes from special regions of the world, and that's really what concerns me more.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Mm-mm.
You made some good points there about, the 1960, that 1 year when everyone set the world record. I mean, I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong and it's not the technology, but I think in the sprints, we're going to see more people get access to the shoes and more people running faster, because, it wasn't like people were approaching Usain Bolt's world records this year at the men's side. It was only on the women's side that times were like, wow. And one other thing, again, I'm also open, as I said, to being wrong. Like, some people were making the argument of, no, COVID changed things. People were really holed up. They could just train for a year. They weren't racing all the time. They also weren't partying all the time. They couldn't go out to bars. They were just very focused. They missed athletics because of COVID, and they were super focused. Now, maybe that was a little bit, again, I think we'll have proof in a couple of years, but I think what we saw this year on the sprint sides is kind of what we saw in distance running in 2016, 2017, when Kipchoge started doing these times and a few people had access to it. And you're like, wow, he's amazing. Then you're like, wait, everyone's starting to do it. And I think we're going to see that. But it's hard to figure it out, because, again, we talked about it. Does it downplay the talent? You still have to be super talented. We're only talking about like 0.1, maybe 0.2 in 100 meters. So if you're not already close to one of the best in the world, it's not like it's going to take a national class athlete and make them world class. And one of the positives about the records going down, particularly on the women's side, is a lot of those records, let's be honest, from the 80s, were probably the results of steroids and performance enhancing drugs. So, to see those records broken wouldn't be a sad thing in my book. And also, I've argued that a good idea, I don't know, I guess we could have done it in 2000, but maybe we do it in 2025, just wipe all the records out and start over. And then we, have new records, but that may be too radical of an idea.
Yes, that's what Gianni Merlo, AIPS president, journalist from Gazzetta dello Sport, had been campaigning for, to wipe out all records and start afresh on the year 2000. So there are arguments for that. So, final question. What is your take on Supershoes? Good or bad for the sport?
They used to really bother me, but now, hey, now I guess I like them now. I mean, I've worn them; they're amazing to wear. They give me something as a journalist now to talk about. So, and I do think that, like, I mean, Nick Willis said it best, double Olympic 1500 medalist. He's like, the shoe companies spend so much money sponsoring this site, and people wanted to act like the shoes were important. And for a long time, they weren't important. And now they're actually important. But the weird thing is the athletes want to act like they're unimportant. So maybe it's good that it'll keep the shoe companies involved in the sport and trying to innovate and sponsoring it. So I don't want to sound like an old guy that doesn't like change. But it's not all good in my opinion. To me, the fairness and the cost, at the lower levels of the sport, it's like, I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't upset me if they wanted to somehow change the rules and get rid of it. But at this point in time, I'm just going to enjoy, wow, that person is really fast. Yeah, that doesn't mean they're the all-time greatest person just because they're the all-time fastest person. And try. You've got to use your brain a little bit more to analyze what the times mean.
And Pierre-Jean?
Yes, as a fond of history, I can see that there were already many technical change, and we cannot compare the times set by Nurmi or Owens or Bobbays or Ron Clark with today's athletes. There is no direct comparison, but we can still find ways to compare them. And what we have today, maybe we will laugh about our new technologies in 30 years' time. Is the evolution of the things, but maybe World Athletics could freeze those technological change in defining exactly what is a shoe. They've, for example, defined exactly what is a shot or a discus, but not yet what is a shoe or a pole, by the way. We can imagine a lot of evolution in pole, because if you read the rules, it can be really anything. So maybe we will see pole vaulters doing 10 meters with special materials that are not that are within the actual rules. But as I said, what bothers me is more the availability of these new technologies, and it's not fair for everyone because they don't have access. But I'm talking about technologies and techniques in general, not only those shoes.
Yeah. So a huge thank you to both of you for a really enlightening discussion. It was really interesting and I enjoyed it a lot. Now, while today's focus was on Supershoes, we still want to hear from both of you what were your favorite athletics moments of 2021. So who's going to start first? Pierre-Jean, you go.
So my best moment was being in a stadium with crowd, and it didn't happen for some time. It was in Paris. Diamond League. There was 15,000 people. When I bought my ticket because I wanted to go like a spectator. I had no athletes there. And when I approached Charity Stadium, I saw so many people on the street. I was like, wow. And instead of being annoyed to make the queue, I was so happy that people were back in stadiums and there would be public the best sport ever. So that was my favorite moment, having a crowd and people applauding and shouting on the stands was really emotional for me, because I could realize that how much we missed track the lockdowns, and how much it is important for us to have communions, those kind of communions in our life.
And your second favorite?
My second favorite is I was watching women's high jump final, and I noticed Nicola McDermott was writing a journal, and writing numbers on her shirt. And I found that so intriguing because, yes, many athletes have journals, but hers is very artistic. And there was drawings, poems, numbers, and all those resonating a lot to me because I kind of used the same thing. That was the kind of same thing I did in fine arts, and I found it so poetic from her because it was in the meantime artistic and also very pragmatic and scientific because she was noting, giving notes to her to some technical parts of her jump. So I found it very beautiful actually to watch. And my last moment was Cheruiyot, uh, who was beaten by Ingrid Nixon in the 15,000 in Tokyo, and he decided to give him a bracelet. So the winner not only was awarded a medal, but also, and more symbolically, a Kenyan bracelet by his rival. And Cheruiyot planned to give the bracelet to whoever beat him in the final. And I think that was a beautiful gesture and very symbolic uh, prize for the Norwegian.
Now, Robert, what about you?
It was a little bit obscure, maybe for our international viewers, but we had two NCAA cross-country, collegiate cross-country championships in America this year. The 2020 championship was held in March this year, and that was kind of the first big sporting event we had in the U.S., so I was very excited about it. They didn't let any spectators go. They didn't let any media go, but it was kind of surprising. The two runners from the University of Alabama, Mercy Chalangat from Kenya and Amaris Tanisima of Alabama, they went first and third, and it was a big surprise. But to see them together after the race, I mean, look at the joy on their face. They did an interview on ESPN, and they were so happy for each other and just such good friends. I really thought it represented the best of athletics. I mean, we had a lot of problems in America with the George Floyd and racial strife and all of that, and to see a black woman from Kenya and a white woman from Alabama just really in love with each other, and their performances that day was awesome. And also just it represented that we're back for athletics. We're going to have a great year. And then we did have a great year. I mean, being at the Olympics was amazing. I didn't get to go to Rio because of Zika. The doctor told me not to go if we were going to start a family. So I really wanted to go to Tokyo. And then we got there, and that Karsten Warholm race, that was absolutely amazing. I mean, 45:94, like this race had been hyped and hyped and hyped for years. You know, Benjamin, Warholm, and you know, Warholm does it. It lived up to the hype. Absolutely amazing. I mean, we'd never seen a race like that, and everyone ran so fast. It was just crazy. Not gonna lie, the next day when the women's world record was broken, it made that men's race a little less impressive because you're like, wait a minute, is it the technology? So it's totally appropriate that we're having this conversation now, but you know, what a run there by Warholm. And then the end of the Olympics was pretty cool for me as an American. I mean, the women's 4x4 team. I mean, have we ever had a superstar team like that? Allison Felix, Sydney McLaughlin, Delilah Muhammad. Which one am I missing? I think Mo. And we had 4 individual gold medalists on the same relay, and I thought that, you know, just as an American, like, our women are so amazing to have that much star power, sort of, on the same relay was absolutely amazing. So those were my 3 biggest sort of moments overall. I do have one extra one. I couldn't limit it to 3, but the U.S. race of the year to me, I mean, at Let'sRun.com, it kind of bothers me sometimes. People are always focused on the future, maybe just athletics in general. It's like somebody will be setting a world record or winning a gold medal. Then someone's like, hey, did you notice the 17-year-old that finished 9th place? They're the future. Like, people are always thinking about who's going to be the next great one. But the young American Cole Hocker had been running fast all indoors, and Matthew Centrowitz, the reigning Olympic champion, wasn't happy about it. He had talked sort of hyped the race up. And coming off the turn, Centrowitz had a big lead, but Hawker, the young kid, came back and just edged him at the finish line, but had time to sort of silence the crowd at the same time. So this was just really exciting as a distance fan and as an American, because you got to see one of our all-time greats in good form, but then he's being beaten by someone younger. So it's like, okay, we had some dark days there in the 80s and 90s when we had not much to root for. Hopefully we're going to have somebody to root for the next 10 or 15 years. So that was a race, again, that was hyped up like the Warholm race, and really more than delivered what sometimes when you hype something up, it's a disappointment. Both those races certainly were not disappointments. Yeah, there I am in Tokyo. Actually, I was following. I'd been to the Olympics before, but never actually worked it as a journalist. So it was cool that they let us out on the track. I had another picture. I should have done it with me and Jonathan Galt lying down on the track, like we were exhausted, because anyone who's gone to the Olympics as a journalist knows there's a morning session, there's an evening session. We were doing podcasts at 3 a.m, but it was fun. Even if we were only allowed to leave our hotel room for 15 minutes a day, unless we were going to the track. So you might as well spend all day at the track, because the only other place you could really go was 7-Eleven. So I'm really thankful that the Tokyo people, held the Olympics, because I think it was kind of, some people didn't want them to hold it, and I felt like one thing that nobody was talking about was the athletes. Like, I know we have to worry about the world's health, but these people dedicate their lives to it. They're super healthy. I don't think COVID is going to be a problem for them, particularly if they're vaccinated. Like, for them to miss out on this would be a real shame. So it was great that we had so many amazing moments. And I feel like it was important for the world to get back together, and just celebrate what the human body can do.
I definitely agree that it was absolutely important for everybody's morale, but it was hugely important for the athletes. And my gosh, I mean, I watched this one from afar, but it was totally amazing. It was really a fantastic Olympic Games, and a huge thank you to Japan for actually staging it when, as you say, the majority of people in the country had turned against the idea. Then as things went on and Japan had a good medal haul, then tide started to change and they started to appreciate it. But really, a big thank you to Japan.
The only negative, Anna, was that you weren't there. We definitely missed you in the mix zone.
Cool.
You need to come out of retirement for 2024.
Oh, definitely. I'm planning to be in Paris. No worries. So we're now at the end of our program, and it was really great having Pierre, Jean, and Robert with us on the show. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and see you next week on Love Athletics. And we're going to resume the regular show, looking together at the highlights, comments, and analysis of what's been happening in our sport over the past few weeks. Because I was on loan to tennis for some time, so we have a month to catch up on Friday. Take care. Thanks a lot. Ciao.